Hello, welcome to another week. It is Monday, the 24th of April, and I'm Louisa Munson, and I'm here to welcome you to another, let's see what kind of energy comes up. We've got an Ola Botard from my husband, who also runs the Iberian FM phone-in, which I have to say is great. Whilst you're here, Carl, I need to ask you, do you know where my tarot cards are? Because I'm supposed to be doing a reading with them. They were very close to the computer and I can no longer see them. Never mind. Anyway, today I wanted to talk more about the energies of the moon. So, for instance, we've got 12 signs of the zodiac, and you might already know that there are 4 elements. So we've got fire, earth, air, and water. And the moon will go through all of those different signs in the space of a month, in just slightly less than a month, in 28 days. So what I'm going to do is each day this week, or Monday to Thursday, because that's what I do during the week, is these 4 shows, is I'm going to take a different day and look at a different element. So today I want to look at the moon through the fire signs and kind of give you a feel for how sorry, I got really hungry this morning. Thank you very much. Okay, well, we'll see what I can do. I'm sure I can find some cards from somewhere for after the astrological forecast, because that's how I like to start these shows. I mean, these shows are just here really to help people feel a little bit more confident, how to learn a little bit about astrology. I know there's a lot of people that are new to astrology, and also people that love astrology and just want to have an astrological hangout, so it's a place where we can just hang out, have fun, talk about the forecast, chat about whatever really, and just see what comes up, what arises. So I want to talk about the moon through the fire signs. Now, I guess one of the things to bear in mind is, like, why would we do this? Like, why is it important to understand the moon signs? Well, first of all, like when the moon goes through a particular sign, it has a kind of emphasis, or it leaves almost like a taste. The moon really represents, in our birth charts, it represents our emotions, it represents our psyche, and it represents all things on a psychic awareness, and very much on a feeling basis. And of course, we feel this all around us. So, for instance, just last week we had the total solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, and the energy was, palpable across the world. There were lots and lots of really kind of stressy people, because, the total solar eclipse is a really big event. And when the moon is in the sign of Aries, people get a little bit angsty, So I just thought it would be a helpful little guide to how you might be feeling when the moon goes through the different signs, but also to give you a bit of a heads up as to how you might feel if you're born with the moon in Aries, or the moon in Leo, or the moon in Sagittarius, which are our 3 fire signs. So let's get cracking now, shall we? First of all, I'm just going to bring up, before we go any further, I'm just going to bring up the, hang on, there it is. I'm going to bring up tomorrow's forecast. And while I'm doing that, I will find the cards and also give us a forecast for Tuesday, the 25th of April. So let's get cracking, shall we? Everyone, so for the 25th of April, that is Tuesday, 25th of April, we've got a few different really calming energies which are going on. So we've got a lovely sextile to the sun by the moon, and the moon's also in a trine with Saturn. So it feels like we're emotionally available to start building new possibilities, which feels really good. We've also got a lovely sextile from the sun to Saturn as well. So it feels very much like we are, again, kind of in a balance. Now, the sun, the moon, and Saturn, when they're working really well together, it feels like we're really wholesome and healed, because the sun represents our childlike self. The moon represents our childlike self at some level. Saturn represents us as an authority, and the sun really represents us as an authentic being, somebody who is absolutely assertive and in their power. So I really see that tomorrow, Tuesday the 25th, we are really quite balanced, really quite well put together, which is great. Other great things is I think it's also a healing day. We've got a lovely energy between Venus and Chiron, and also the moon and Mercury. So we've got a certain amount of articulation. It's a good day for us. So there you go. Okay, so I've picked out 2 cards. I managed to find my tarot cards. Now, this is the Mythic Tarot. I love the Mythic Tarot. I've had it since I was about 15, so at least 30 years. And I've picked 2 cards for tomorrow. The first one that came out is a bit of a Debbie Downer. It's a little bit, if you know this deck, or if you know the cards, you'll know that this can be a bit to do with emotional disappointment. So I also picked a second card, so that if we can deal with our emotional disappointment, what can come out of it. Before I just tell you about that, I just want to quickly say hello to Nubianette, who's joining us, probably from work. Are you at work today? I love the fact that people, stream me or like listen in while they're doing their work. It's kind of cool. So welcome from the US. And if you are listening in, let us know, drop us a message in the chat room. You can become part of the show, and we can talk a little bit more. So yeah, the 5 of Cups. The cups are very emotional. The cups represent all of the kind of water signs, actually. If we were to talk about because we're talking about the moon a bit later, it's very much about our emotions. And you'll see that there's 4 cups that are knocked over and 1 that is still standing. And you'll see that we've got Psyche here, which is funny because we're talking about the moon. And I did say that the moon represents the psyche. And she's trying to catch up with, I think, Eros. I may be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But anyway, what it is, this card is about realizing where there's a bit of information that we didn't quite get right. And we realize that maybe we've been lied to, we've been deceived, but it doesn't matter if we did or didn't. It's almost like we feel it. That's the thing. We feel like something has been knocked over. All our emotions are kind of, there's a word in French, it's bouleversé, like, we're kind of knocked right over and spun over. But there's still 1 cup full of the human emotion, and it's still there. It's still saying all is not lost. So bear that in mind. If something comes up for you tomorrow and you feel like, oh my God, I've been really knocked off kilter, remember that the sooner you can get back on your feet, the sooner you can go galloping off into a wild adventure. The Knight of Wands is really about initiating new things. It's very playful. It's very bold. But you have to find your feet again. So there you go. All is not lost. That's for tomorrow. Anyway, we've got a few more people joining us. We've got Colleen Murphy. Hi from work. We've got the Global Nobles. Hello from Lisbon. And we've also got Richard Laws joining us from the Lake of the Ozarks. So yeah, welcome all of you. All of you are American, by the way, aren't you? As far as I know. And I've got a fellow Brit here, Owen Lloyd Martin from the north of Portugal. So welcome. Hello. So I don't know how many of you know where your moon is. Like, where was your moon when you were born? Was it in a fire sign, an earth sign, an air sign, or a water sign? Or do you just know the name of the sign that your moon was in? Because this week I will be talking about it and giving a little bit of an identikit about it, so you get a feel for how you might describe it in a nutshell. You might also know the moon sign of your ex-lover or your husband or wife or sometime paramour. It's quite helpful to know their moon signs, because when the moon moves around, for instance, I know that Mr. M has his moon in Scorpio and mine is in the sign of Pisces, and I'll get to that I think on Thursday when I look at the moon signs in the sign of water. But when the moon goes into the sign that your moon was in at birth, it usually creates a day when you're really quite emotional. So it's useful to watch the patterns of the moon. And there's loads of websites which will tell you where the moon is at any time, so you can always track it. You can even put it in a diary, which is what I would absolutely recommend for menstruating women. It's really, really useful. So anyway, let's have a look. What I'm going to do is bring up the fire sign I'm going to bring up a slide about the moon first, just to give you a feel for what the moon rules. So these are the key facts. So the moon changes signs every 2.5 days. It looks like it's every 25 days, but it's just that font. It's every 2.5 days the moon changes. So we get a kind of different feel every couple of days. It's very much swaying our emotions, like I said, our psyche, and also our fertility, which is why I mentioned menstruating women. You know, we tend to menstruate in tune with the moon. And also our fertility, like when we have babies and stuff, it goes with a moon cycle. When you look at the fertility cycles of men and women, because there are absolute astrological times when we are more like that, you can coordinate them. Like if you know when your partner is excuse me, fertile and you're fertile, they're the times that you can choose to make love if you want to create a little being. In fact, Mr. M doesn't know this, but I would look at both of our moon positions in tune with our procreation. The moon also shows how we can get triggered, because it shows where we are slightly weak. You know, it's our emotions, it's our vulnerability. Like, how vulnerable will we allow ourselves to be? So just knowing somebody's moon sign will give you a real good heads up as to, are they going to allow vulnerability? Are they going to fight for their right to put up boundaries? It's pretty important. Now, in a birth chart, when I'm looking at somebody's birth chart, the position of the moon can describe their children. It can also describe you as a child. I often think, because it's very much about our instincts and our emotions and our first behaviors. And I think the moon is sometimes a much better representation of that. Like when you look at a toddler and you see how they react to things, which is very much the moon. It's not the sun, that's the personality. The personality comes a bit later because it's crafted. So, you know, it really gives you a heads up as to how you might have been as a child. Were you very vulnerable? Were you open to everything? It also describes the mum. So, for instance, both my sister and I, we've got the same moon sign, and the moon sign describes, actually, they're the same as my mum's sun sign. So, you know, in our astrology, it's actually describing our mum. And it can describe the whole feminine line. If you're looking at ancestral astrology, it's really quite useful. My first two children have both got their moons in air signs. And so whilst, you know, I'm quite fiery and watery in my actual birth chart, in the things that I do, which are kind of coaching related, teaching, and really using my mind, that really describes somebody that's quite airy and quite philosophical. And so both of my first two children's moon signs really describe that. It often shows family patterns. So you'll often find that children and parents share a similar moon pattern. Like, are you born in the waning moon or the waxing moon? And what aspects is the moon making to other planets? So you often find family patterns related through the moon, because the moon is about the psyche, the fertility, the emotions, and the instincts, and they get passed down. It also shows how we handle our mental health, because obviously it's about our vulnerability. So it gives you a really good idea. Like if you've got something very serious like a Saturn or Chiron or even Mars going over your moon sign, it can show a time when you're a little bit more riled up, a little bit more angry, a little bit more defensive. And so it can give you a clue as to what you might need. And talking about needs, I think the moon lets you know what you need, because that's really where we're vulnerable. Like, when we're truly vulnerable, we will let people know what our needs are. But of course, we learn to have these personalities as represented by the sun. As we grow up, we grow beyond our moon needs, or we still have them, but we pretend we don't have them. So the moon sign really shows what you instinctively need. And I'm just going to flick back and see if anyone's told me where their moon is yet. No, nobody has. So it'd be interesting. I'd love to know from the people that are listening, you know, do you actually notice any difference at the time of the new moon? Do you notice any difference at the time of the full moon? Are there times when you're particularly sensitive? Let us know, because that will no doubt actually fit in with this whole subject. So The global nobles, we've got an Aries moon coming up here. And funnily enough, that's going to be the first moon I talk about today. So let's have a look now. So the moon in Aries, then, this is the sign for Aries, and that's the sign for the moon. And you'll see here, I've just shown you a little fraction of a birth chart, and there's the moon in the sign of Aries. So that's how it would show up in a birth chart. And the key words, because these are all the fire signs. And if you think about it, what are the fire signs known for? Like, what do we know about that element? We know that it's hot, it's expanding. If you light a fire, and the qualities are right, it's going to spread like wildfire. You want to try and contain it, but it's very difficult to contain. In fact, you need big old burly firemen to come with a big old hose to kind of water it out. The fire can get out of control quite quickly. So people with an instinctive, fiery temperament are likely to have some of these qualities here. So there's also, so we've got 3 fire signs. We've got Aries, we've got Leo, and we've got Sagittarius. Now, in astrology, we also have 4 kind of key temperaments. So we've got like our elements are, we've got 3 kind of temperaments. We've got our elements and our sort of temperaments. And so our elements are fire, earth, air, and water. And we'll be talking about the others as we go through this week. We're talking about fire today. But we've also got qualities of these elements. So today, in the moon in Aries, which is a fire sign, is also known as being cardinal. And that quality is all to do with having get up and go, initiating things, and they're leaders. So if you compare like the energy of fire and this initiation, we've got really independent, daring people. And I've put impatient lovers as well. So, we have very, very quick and dirty. I don't mean dirty as in like naughty and rude necessarily, but we have quite direct people. People with the moon in Aries really like to be direct. They've got quite a short temper, quite usually, and they like to lead things. So if they're upset about something, they will normally lead with it without too much haste. It's also the first sign of the zodiac. The first sign is associated with being very much in their identity and wanting to be served first. So if you've got a child with their moon in Aries, they will be extremely impatient if you don't attend to them straight away, as opposed to somebody with their moon in Pisces or something like that. In terms of their emotions, they're quite fiery, they're warm, they're passionate, and they're active. Here's one of the things about the cardinal signs. The cardinal signs, they're bold, they take control. They like to move forwards, and they're always looking at doing things. Really, they are doers. So they are kind of unstoppable. And the sign of Aries is ruled by Mars. So if you imagine like Mars, the energy of Mars, which is very much about, it's very yang, it's very masculine. That mixed with the moon, you've got people that absolutely are quite courageous, and they don't hesitate to take action, when they feel absolutely sort of empowered and emboldened to. Now, in terms of conflict, they're pretty good at it, I have to say. They do like to have a bit of a fight. For them, it's really important to clear the air. If something's not quite right, they don't want to sit on it, because that takes time. And like I said, they're quite impatient. They're go-getters. They want to, they want to move forwards. They don't like things holding them back. And they can be quite defensive. They will quite possibly stand up for themselves before they actually hear what's really going on. So sometimes they are a bit too hasty, and they speak up really quite clearly. And they've got a very, when something really matters, they're able to just speak quite boldly. I've used the word bold quite a few times. It's funny because I know people with moon in Aries don't really like to feel that vulnerable, because that makes them harmable, and obviously they don't want to be harmed, and they are the most defensive of the 3 fire signs. But that said, they have a lot of courage, and courage, if you look at the etymology of it, cœur, as in heart, like from French, and you'll find that all the way throughout the Latin languages. They're very much in their heart. And so they stand quite strong. And actually, they have quite good levels of vulnerability. Like they will be really open. They'll say, look, that didn't really work for me at all. And so they will bear themselves open, and they're quite fearless in it. And I have to say, I really respect them. Health-wise, they are likely to overwork and overplay, and they're quite rigid. Now, if you're in a relationship with somebody with the moon in Aries, one of the things to know about is they are not necessarily empathic. If you fall and hurt yourself, they're not likely to run over and give you a band-aid necessarily, unless, the rest of their chart is overly caring. They are quite kind of tough. They're like, pick yourself up, rub your arm, get on with it. They won't pussyfoot around. They do need to be the best. They do like to win an argument, and they need to have the last word. Usually that's one of, that's what you'll notice if you're in a relationship with somebody with the moon in Aries. Now, if you have a moon in Aries mum or somebody with that kind of profile, they will fight tooth and nail for you. They absolutely will, but they'll probably bollock you after as well. So they'll really stand up for you, and then they'll give you what for as well. They'll tell you what your shortcomings are. So anyway, they are bright, they're brilliant, they are forceful, they're not to be messed with, and we love them. So there you go. That's my moon in Aries. So global nobles, I hope I haven't offended you at all. Let's just double check. Nothing's come in yet to say that. We've got Richard Law saying he's got moon in Gemini, and also saying how much could be revealed with the time of death chart. A lot, basically a lot. But what's revealed, and this is slightly off topic, but what is revealed with a death chart is not so much about where people are going, because I've no idea and I can't check that. But what it does show is what is coming up for the people who've lost that person. So you don't really see death in the charts of people per se. You see death in the charts of people who are losing people. So for instance, if I was to lose somebody, that loss would show up in my chart as opposed to when my death occurred. It's very difficult to see when death is going to occur. Similarly, it's really difficult to see when birth is going to occur, because everyone's birth chart is quite ordinary. But when you look at how that birth chart fits into the birth charts of its parents, it's pretty significant. So I hope that sort of explains that. Newbienet says, I'm rarely very sensitive. It takes a lot to annoy me unless I feel someone isn't being treated fairly. Well, it's interesting that you say that, Newbienet, because we're going to have a look at the moon in Sagittarius very shortly, and that will give you an idea as to yours. Richard Laws is saying, money idea for you, birth chart and death chart on a headstone. Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I have my ascendant in Aries. Well, some of this will probably stick for you as well, Irene, because, the ascendant shows what people know about you. So it's not quite what's at the core of you, but it's a little bit about your public image, what people first see when they come across you. And your moon and Pluto in Scorpio. Well, we will come to that on Thursday. And the moon in Scorpio, Scorpio and Aries are both ruled by Mars, so there is a similarity. They are quite defensive. So I imagine some of what I just shared with you will ring true. And Gillian, hello, on catch up again. Well, Gillian, I'm going to be talking about the moon in Sagittarius soon. So we've got a couple of moon in Sagittarius coming up. But first of all, let's have a look at the moon in Leo. So the moon in Leo is our second fire sign. That's the sign for Leo, and that's the sign for the moon. And you can see it here in this chart. So you see that's the sign of Leo, and there's the moon. In this chart, it's very, very tight up next to Mars and Uranus. That's going to make for a fiery character. But anyway, it's the second fire sign. And this one has a fixed quality. So it's quite stubborn, rooted, and reliable. Like the fixed, they're like an oak tree, they don't want to budge. So if you think about an unbudgeable fire, we've got somebody who is quite proud, can be a bit overbearing. People with a moon in Leo tend to like to be center of attention. Now, you may well know that for the sign of Leo that, like Leo is ruled by the sun, and the sun emits light. There is this feeling that there's a big personality in the room. But the difference with the moon, it's like there is an emotional need to be the center of attention. And it doesn't matter how it arrives necessarily. There are some moon in Leo people that have very quiet personalities, and yet they can be central to everything through different strategies and stuff. So they don't have to necessarily be that bright and bold. They can find that they're the center of things without that. Now, their emotions tend to be quite warm and fiery again. So they do react to things, but they're very, very proud, which is like a fixed fire thing. They don't want to be wrong, and so they'll get quite angry if you. Well, I say angry, they won't want to lose face either. So it's quite an interesting little juxtaposition there. But given that they're sort of stubborn and rooted and reliable and also quite fiery and warm, you've also got people that are very devoted in their relationships, very generous, and also quite showy because they like to be the best lover, and they will go to some, you know, um, effort to win that title. Now, in terms of conflict, Moon and Leo will often go to blame because they can't be wrong. That's their pride. Whereas an Aries will just shout you down, like the moon in Aries will say, "No, you're wrong, and I'm fine about that." The moon in Leo will, I think, sometimes use blame and can be a little bit self-righteous, and they really, really want to be liked. So they can get quite offended, which is another sign of pride. Like they'll what's that phrase? Don't let pride go before a fall, or something like that. Someone can write it in for me in the comments, I'm sure. They tend to overdo it, and they tend to, in terms of their health, they get quite dramatic illness. They get quite exhausted because it's quite tiring to be prominent. It's quite tiring to put yourself central to things, and it's not necessarily because they're wrong in any way, shape, or form. It's nothing like that. They are absolutely beautiful beings and beautiful people, and really, really good fun, and really warm and open-hearted. The expanding warmth of the sun via the moon is really quite nice. Now, their needs, they need to be number one, and they also need to feel admired. They also need to feel fancied. They need to feel attractive. And like I said, they really need to feel central. So out of our 3 fire signs, these are the ones that are most vain, and these are the ones that will go to more of an effort to be seen as the best. So whereas Aries is more about being a bit tough, a bit more competitive, they have a bit more drive in their needs. The moon and Leos will really want to be liked more, so they'll go to so much more effort. And I think because of that, they do tend to get quite dramatic illnesses when they get poorly. They wear themselves out, and then their emotions can get quite big. But they are so bright, really, really bright. And they'll fight you for a mirror. If you're in a relationship with them, they will fight you for the last of the hair gel or something. And they may well, outdress you and things like that. So they're great fun as well. So anyway, there you go, moon in Leo. Let's have a look at moon in Sagittarius. We've got a couple here. So here we've got the element of fire. So again, they're warm, they're bright, they're mutable, which is a different kind of quality. And mutable is another word for changeable. So they go with the flow. They're really easygoing, and they seem to be quite unboundaried. So this is the fire that kind of goes off in any old direction. Whereas the Aries fire is just really direct and will sort of explode. The Leo fire is quite contained and rooted. The Sagittarian fire will just go off in any old direction, and you won't know when it's going to happen. They're quite spontaneous. Their emotions are fiery, warm, passionate, and adventurous. So if you think of unboundaried fire, it is adventurous. It is expansive. It really represents belief systems. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so we've got the moon and Jupiter together, or that sort of feeling of the two together. Jupiter is an expansive planet. It's very much about our belief systems. So it's quite philosophical as well. Now, in their relationships, yes, they're warm, and yes, they are really up for sharing. They really want to have a fun relationship. They want to have a laugh. They can be quite silly, and they can also be a bit wavering, a bit fleeting, and a bit changeable. In terms of what their lovers might say, is they might say they're a little bit unreliable because they change quite frequently. because the wind might change direction, and they'll go where the ease is. They'll go where it feels most fun. They'll go where it feels most expansive. So they don't tend to stick around in relationships with people that are very serious or too dramatic or too demanding. The moon in Sagittarius love will be out of there. So again, in terms of conflict, they'll avoid drama. They'll walk out. If they get trapped into an argument, they'll be clever. And they will be a little bit on the sarcastic side. In terms of health, they are very changeable and existential. So they can flex through it quite well. And because they're quite hopeful and optimistic, they don't tend to wear themselves out as much as people with the moon in Aries or the moon in Leo. However, they're a lot more up for overindulging. So for somebody with a moon in Sagittarius, they're more likely to just make themselves ill because of their lifestyle. So like I said, they're hopeful, they're expansive, and they can also get I guess people might say they're a bit hopeless as well, because they are sometimes a bit unboundaried, and you really feel them as well. So there you go. That's a little introduction to the moon through the fire signs. I wonder how that felt. I wonder how that worked for you guys. So I've got a little bit of info coming in. The Global Nobles saying, I balance my Aries moon and Leo sun with numerology life path of 9. Well, that's interesting, because the life path of 9, like the 9th house, is very much about Sagittarius. So it's like you've got representation between the Aries, the Leo, and the Sagittarian. That is really kind of fiery. It's really bright. It's really warm, with the flexibility to be bold and direct, to also be central, and to also know when to clear off and have a great adventure. So also the Sage and the Empath. The Sage is very much, again, related to the Sagittarian energy, because they're very much about beliefs, and they don't get too fixed in their beliefs. And the Empath, that's great. So I'm the lion that never roars, no temper, and I hate conflict, but I'm definitely the leader and go-getter. Yeah, do you know what? I really love that. I love that kind of energy. There's a sort of independence with the fire signs that, as a fellow fire sign, and we've got some listening in today, we've got 2 double Sagittarians that are listening, and I'm a Sagittarian as well. There's a lot of sort of leadership. There's a lot of wanting. So there's a difference, isn't there? Because like people with the moon in Aries are quite happy to lead others, whereas a lot like Sagittarian energies, they're quite happy to lead themselves, don't want to lead others so much. But there is definitely an independence of spirit with the fire signs, which I really, really love. We've got moon keeping my sun in Sag. That's what Gillian's put. And Newbinette, I've dated crazy, and I'm all in or nothing. And I'm sure, when it gets too much, Newbinette, I wonder how you cope with that. I wonder how that feels, if somebody tries to get too heavy and get too much with your lovely Sagittarian moon. Alison Sheldrake is saying, your Mr. M sent me over here. I'm Sagittarius. Is he trying to tell me something? Well, you're in really good company. We've got a lot of fire sign energy tonight. And isn't it funny that this is about the fire sign moons? So anyway, that was a little introduction to how the moon works through the fire signs. Tomorrow, I'm going to look with the moon through the earth signs. That's going to be Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So if you know anyone with their moons in those signs, it's worth listening to. If you are that person, it's also worth listening to. I'm going to try and do it as impartially as possible, but of course, from my own perspective, I'm flawed. So I really love, all the little bits that you're going to chip in with. And of course, if we've got ex-lovers, and of course, I know the fire signs, the moon signs of a lot of different people. I hear all the bad stories as well as the good ones. So I'm going to try and be as impartial as possible. But anyway, I hope it's all good. And tomorrow we've got Helen joining us. We've got Helen joining us today, but Helen, I'll be looking at Taurus moon tomorrow. So join me at 6 tomorrow, and I'll dish the dirt a little bit more. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it's been useful. Remember, the cards for tomorrow is, if you get this emotional disappointment, it's time to get back on that horse. And funnily enough, the Knight of Wands is very much a fire sign. If it was a moon sign, it would be like the moon in Sagittarius or the moon in Aries. So it's very, very apt. So anyway, thanks for joining me today. Hope to catch you again some other time. Bye for now.